Mobility. Combat and support vehicles moving swiftly and surely on roads. Cross-country, across any kind of terrain, in any kind of weather. Mobility, so that fighting men can bring maximum firepower to bear on the enemy. In today's swift-moving, far-ranging, highly fluid warfare, a fighting army must be a mobile army. Mobility is the inseparable twin of firepower, both cardinal requisites for winning wars. No environment presents more formidable obstacles to mobility than the tropics. American troops grimly learned this fact as they advanced through the islands of the Southwest Pacific in World War II. And as we continue to learn in Southeast Asia today. The tropical rainforest is choked with trees, vegetation, and vines. It is strewn with obstacles, fallen branches, tree trunks, and stumps. It abounds with rivers and streams. This is true also of tropical grasslands. Drenching rains keep the ground moist and slippery, and mud is a constant hazard found everywhere. Because the United States Army must be ready to fight anywhere, it must have vehicles that can operate effectively even in the difficult, exhausting climate and terrain of the tropics. To ensure this, the Army is engaged in continuous research, development, testing, and evaluation of our present and future mobility needs. Military and civilian experts carry on this work under controlled conditions that permit great precision and accuracy. These studies are supported by extensive field tests where vehicles and drivers are subjected to long periods of wear and tear, just as they would be in actual warfare. But here, they are under the direct supervision of military and civilian engineers and scientists. The Army's most recent and most comprehensive field test of tropical mobility was conducted in the Chapo El Llano region of the Republic of Panama, some 40 miles east of the Canal Zone. This film is a report on that test. Swamp Fox II was undertaken with the full cooperation of the government of the Republic of Panama, which shared in the findings. The Inter-American Agricultural Cooperation Service in Panama, known as SICAP, participated in the exercise. The base camp area was chosen by engineering and soil specialists in order to locate it close to different types of tropical terrain. One type of terrain is known as lower grassland. It is fairly flat and open country. This was designated as Test Area A. The second type of terrain, the location of Test Area B, was a densely forested hilly region with high cover or canopy. Test Area C was at the Mamani River, typical of the fast current rivers found in many tropical regions. The fourth test area, D, was upper grassland, a steep upland sector of sharp slopes abounding with grass and other vegetation. A tent city sprang up swiftly in the base camp area to provide living quarters, an administrative office, laboratory facilities, and maintenance and supply. The cooperation of our Panamanian hosts was symbolized by the flags flying and this bilingual welcome sign. All materials and supplies were delivered by air. H-34 helicopters shuttled in everything, including this 1,800-pound generator, which provided light and power. It also made possible such activities as outdoor movies. Wash day usually wasn't a good drying day, but the clothes did get an airing. As for drinking water, the Army Special Engineering Team drew its supply from the Tarable River and purified it at the rate of 2,400 gallons a day. Samples of the intake were constantly analyzed and a record made of the degree of purity. No aspect of the daily working and living routine went unobserved or unrecorded. New and continuing tests of every kind were always in progress. At mealtime, for instance, food experts tried out quick-serve rations. Clothing specialists studied the effects of rain, heat, humidity, and fungus growth on clothing, jungle boots, and other personal gear. All the experience and findings were shared by Panamanian Army officers and the civilian scientists from SciCap. The test operations jumped off in Area A, the lower grasslands. All vehicles were tested with their full payload. To evaluate their cross-country capabilities, they were driven across difficult terrain abounding in water hazards. An engineering test team coordinated their investigations by using portable radios. When a vehicle was immobilized, they recorded all engineering and scientific data for future analysis. Trafficability tests were conducted on several vehicles. These were made to determine the minimum strength needed by different layers of soil to support off-the-road vehicular traffic. The nature of the soil came under intensive study. Over 400 soil samples were taken for chemical and physical analysis and moisture content. Drawbar pull-slip tests were conducted on each vehicle available. These tests measured the strength of pull in relation to the amount of slippage. At the base camp and elsewhere in the test areas, the many specialists of the scientific research team were carrying out a wide variety of gainful activities. Meteorologists continuously recorded weather conditions such as precipitation, wind direction, and cloud conditions. Botanists collected and classified samples of plants, trees, grasses, and vines. Ecologists studied the relationship of these and other organisms to the environment. Physiographers studied the variety of landforms. All this information had a bearing, directly or indirectly, on the problems of vehicular mobility in the tropics. After 20 days of exhaustive testing in Area A, it was significant that most of the many vehicle immobilizations occurred at stream crossings. This was because of slippery soils at stream banks, which prevented the vehicles from developing enough traction. In this constant struggle to avoid being mired, tracked vehicles appeared better able to come to grips with the slippery mud. It was also apparent that vehicles of great size and weight, especially the wheeled kind, were at a disadvantage compared to those that were smaller and lighter. This should not be considered a true defect of these huge vehicles, which, like the others under test, were designed for and gave quality performance cross-country on normal terrain in temperate climates. The immobilization of wheeled vehicles of all sizes strongly emphasized the importance of aggressive tire traction. Those equipped with conventional tires or military desert tires couldn't provide the required traction, and the vehicles had to be retrieved. The inability of these tires to be self-cleaning reduced their traction to the stalling point. But the same vehicles, modified only by mounting a special type of tire having a so-called aggressive tread and a wide base, provided greater traction and thus enjoyed better mobility. All these findings received additional support in the far more rugged test area B, the hilly rainforest with its high canopy of branches and leaves. Test procedures and requirements were essentially the same, calling for cross-country performance over a controlled course. Here, too, drawbar pull-slip measurements were made by the engineering test team people. Not only were the same problems often enlarged to nightmare proportions encountered, but some new ones were added. In the tropical rainforest, nature seemed to have gone wild, creating an obstacle course of dense foliage, hanging vines, decaying vegetation, roots, stumps, and numerous small stream crossings where the inevitable enemy, sticky, slippery mud, lay in wait. The thick vegetation created formidable new obstacles unknown in the grasslands. Again, tracked vehicles had an advantage because of their inherent capability to make tighter turns. The importance of adequate ground clearance became evident. This vehicle was hung up when it ran into an obstacle in excess of 9 inches in height. Woody vines reached out with tentacles of amazing strength to catch in vehicles and thereby slow them down or halt them altogether. These vines, along with branches and swarms of stinging insects, threatened injury to the drivers. This experience resulted in strong recommendations for better cab design to protect the drivers, changes in body lines to reduce protuberances that might catch in vines or trees, and covered cargo area to keep out forest debris and insects. Of prime interest to the target acquisition team was the study of how visible our vehicles and troops would be to an enemy in the natural camouflage of the tropical environment. Of all the impediments, none measured up to the delaying power of mud, which easily retained its laurels as the supreme enemy of tropical mobility. It kept the retrieving vehicles busy, nor was mud confronted only at stream crossings. The thick canopy of leaves and branches shields the forest floor from whatever sunlight occasionally prevails over the rain. Thus, the soil retains a high moisture content and is always wet and slippery. Vehicles encountered a soft surface layer of mud with a firm base underneath. Here again, vehicles with good tractive power, particularly those with tracks, had the advantage. So did wheeled vehicles with aggressive tires having good self-cleaning ability. Their special treads were able to get a good grip on the firm subsoil. Another self-help device proved handy, the front-mounted winch, by which a vehicle can retrieve itself with the aid of an improvised dead man. The grind on vehicles was paralleled by the grind on men. The Swamp Fox II medical officer was always busy tending personnel, yet found time to minister to the needs of local Panamanians. The mission of the medical research team was purely scientific. Their task was to study and catalog the medical effects of the tropical environment. A vital part of this work was the collection of skin disease specimens. Intensive scientific tests were conducted by the Human Factors Engineering team. They sought to determine the effects of the hot, wet tropical environment on the performance of military personnel. The tests moved on to Area D, Upper Grasslands, a region of steep slopes, gullies, and side slopes. Despite its name, it was relatively free of high grass and other vegetation. The grass offered little impediment to vehicles. The test objective here was grade ability, that is, hill climbing ability. The major problem again was slipperiness. Continuous tropical rainfall never gave the slopes a chance to dry out. On this wet hillside, critical slipperiness appeared on slopes as low as 30%. Even with aggressive treads on the tires, wheeled vehicles lacked hill climbing ability. Tracked vehicles that had performed well in the other test areas also showed up to better advantage, comparatively speaking, on the slippery slopes. These upper grasslands proved to the communications research team that even in the tropics, hills can be high enough to cause severe attenuation of VHF signals. Swamp Fox 2 concluded at Area C on the Mamani River. The tests here involved the various aspects of crossing a river as distinguished from passage across the tiny, narrow streams encountered earlier. Here, the added width of the river, its varying depths from shallow to deep, its currents running from 2 miles per hour to 5.5 miles per hour, added to the familiar problems of mud and steepness of banks. The objective here was to determine entrance and exit problems and the swimming and fording capabilities of vehicles in tropical rivers. Some of the amphibious vehicles showed good floating ability, but their swimmability in rapid currents, that is, ability to hold course and maneuver effectively, was disappointing, with few exceptions. The ability to negotiate steep, slippery banks came in for the most intensive study, for this, to no one's surprise, was the most troublesome problem encountered. Where bank slopes were low, a firm bottom of sand and gravel usually made exit easy. In a realistic situation, proper reconnaissance would reveal these sites or determine in advance the amount of slope preparation needed. For test purposes, however, the vehicles were on their own. It was found that where slopes tilted 40% or more, the vehicles usually needed a helping hand. For example, self-help was possible if the vehicle was equipped with capstans. With the aid of a swiftly rigged dead man, this vehicle was able to haul itself up the slippery slope. These river crossings concluded the testing phase of Swamp Fox 2. No time was lost starting the vehicles on the return trek to the canal zone. The testing was over, but the mud was just as muddy. The return crossing of the Mamani River brought the field phase of the project to an end. The parade continued through the colorful Panamanian village of Chapo. The children were delighted, but their parents viewed the procession with a good deal of awe-inspired concern. The testing phase for the vehicles was over, but not for the drivers. With but inches to spare, their skilled hands guided the huge vehicles through the narrow streets. The highly indoctrinated crew never forgot that Swamp Fox 2 was made possible through the cooperation of the Republic of Panama. Unlike the test courses, cooperation is always a two-way street. For example, any damage to the Panamanian roads caused by the heavy, cumbersome vehicles was swiftly repaired by the United States Army. Swamp Fox 2 was designed to provide all the participating scientists and engineers an opportunity to conduct experiments related to mobility. The actual testing was only the beginning. For these mobility experts who worked together as a joint military-civilian task force, the job was far from over. It would take many months to complete the analysis and evaluation of the vast amount of engineering operational data that was gathered, plus the additional scientific knowledge of the environment. All this would ultimately be published in a 10-volume report to be used by the Army to improve its present and future mobility capabilities in the tropical environment. Yet even to the non-technical eye, certain tentative conclusions are apparent. The tropical environment is a most formidable barrier to mobility. Vehicles of standard make, no matter how effectively they perform on normal terrain, are sure to encounter repeated immobilization. It was obvious that only a few vehicles, particularly those fully tracked, can operate effectively in a tropical environment. Whatever the final judgment of the experts will be, all of us can draw reassurance from the immense amount of effort the United States Army devotes to its problems of mobility. Long the world's leader in military transportation, strongly aware that it must be ready to fight on any kind of terrain anywhere in the world, the Army holds with unflagging zeal to the principles that a mobile army is a fighting army, and that it is superior mobility, along with superior firepower, that wins wars.